Here's to dreams of crippled soldiers crossing the bridge to Valhalla before the Firebird catches their scent. The final leg of the journey begins. There would be no quest for landmarks. Costello felt as though he checked all those boxes. A sense of completion and tenacity bookended his meticulousness. Finally. However, none of this wasn't still under a haze of anxiety. The two paths were finally coinciding as he pedaled towards Maine. Maine was a finish line and a checkpoint. Even though he will have accomplished the unthinkable, he will now have to jump on a plane home and maintain the promise he made to himself and those with no closure surrounding the deaths of Tal and Spencer. The bike was starting to show signs of wear. Somehow, he still had everything he would need to pit the bike and get back on the road. It was almost too seamless. He didn't even stop for lunch, just packed snacks and pressed on towards the finish. Costello found an open road free from cars where he drifted to the center and pulled his hands from the bars. He thought about the imaginary finish line he created and remembered there would be no one there to cheer him across. There really even wasn't a designated finish. Just get to Maine and that was the end. He calculated the miles from the New Hampshire and Maine border to Portland into his final leg, but honestly, it was over once he crossed into Maine. Costello got to thinking and decided not to cycle all the way into Portland. Candace will be driving in Saturday, so why not just have her come through York Beach, and then they can drive up to Portland International Jetport since their flight is in the evening. He pulled over and coordinated all this with the hotels and Candace. He was so used to the hustle of Los Angeles, he was amazed at how convenient the hotels were with cancellations and new accommodations. 15 minutes later, he was back upright on the bike and on his way to his new stay in York Beach. As the miles shrunk with each crank towards Maine, the weight of Costello's anxiety began shifting from a touch to a push on his shoulders. The reality was setting in around having to come clean with what he knows about Seattle. The cycling tour felt like the greatest act of procrastination he'd ever commit. He kept trying to push all the pride from accomplishing his goal up to the top, and the gravity of Seattle was winning the battle. The only way he could shift the balance would be to tell someone, something. He pulled over again, took out his phone, and pondered something that was not part of his plan. Every angle and outcome flew around his head. If he calls Avery and tells her what he will be doing when he returns to Los Angeles, would she be able to keep that to herself? Would she trust him? Would she even associate with him? If he were implicating himself in these homicides, what kind of person was he, and how did she fall for him? Maybe she would understand his own confusion about the murders and solely want him to give the families closure, if what he knew would somehow help the case. Costello finally concluded, if he tells her and she loses it, the worst case scenario would be she calls the police and they detain him before he gets to Maine. He looked at the time and calculated he would be at the border in an hour and a half. The GPS team was still monitoring his location, but he could just toss the device, and he would be in Maine long before they could even coordinate tracking him down and detaining him. He threw caution into the wind again and made the call. It went to voicemail. A few seconds passed, and right before he hung up and tried again, he went ahead and started talking. Avery, I hit a wall and have to get something off my chest so I can finish this tour. I can no longer pedal with this hanging over me. I don't have time to get into all the details, but when I come home, I have to talk to the police about my visit to Seattle in 2017. A couple were murdered, and the case has never been solved. I fear I have information that may help investigators solve the case. I think I may have been involved in the case. I don't know what this will lead into, but I can't let the families go any longer without closure. I was prepared to tell you when flying home, but with you no longer coming to Maine, I had to tell you now. I miss you, and I need you too. The voicemail time expired. Costello stared at the phone and knew it was over now. He pulled out the GPS locator and threw it into the brush. He turned off the location services on his phone and powered it off. He took a walk around his bike and cleared his thoughts. Then he checked the mosaic and made sure it would get him to the finish. An hour and 20 minutes later, Costello crossed the border into Maine.